In the last lesson, we took the time to organize the footage in our bit. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the approach we're going to use during the rough cutting process. Let's start by discussing two common approaches to creative editing. Different editors prefer to work in different ways. Some like to work linearly. This approach means that you'll start at the beginning of a scene, and then you'll edit it straight through, all the way to the end. A key point here is that you'll refine the cut as you go, and you'll be completing a relatively polished edit during the process. Others prefer to block in their whole scene very quickly. They'll cut in the major moments first to help them figure out the general pacing. Then, they go back through and refine the cut later by filling in the rest of the picture and the connective tissue in between. I'm personally open to using both methods, depending on things like the type of scene, the deadline, and sometimes just my general mood. For this scene, we'll be using a bit of a combination. Overall, we're going to work pretty linearly so that we can make sure that the sequence of events in the fight flows from one to the next in the correct order. However, in the first rough cut pass, we're also going to be pretty quick and rough with our shot choices, and we're going to try to get all the major fight moments laid out in our sequence relatively fast. I'll be paying some attention to things like camera angles and match edits as we work roughly, but only as much as is needed to get the idea of the scene across. I should mention something here about the goal of the rough cutting stage. Believe it or not, it is not to end up with a well-edited, polished, exciting fight scene. Not yet, at least. That comes later. It's to create a basic editorial structure that we can build on. The sound, music, timing, and polishing will all come later. For now, the shots might jump around a little bit, the sound will be all production audio without any effects, and there won't be any music yet. Later in the course, we'll fine-tune our edits and our shot choices, and we'll add all the bells and whistles. For the time being, just consider this first step like a painter creating a rough sketch before they start painting their final masterpiece in oil. Another very important rule to keep in mind is this: the rule of clarity. The rule of clarity has three main components to it. First, and most importantly, do not confuse the viewer. Illogical shot progressions or edits that are too quick leave the viewer trying to play catch-up, and they emotionally disengage from the scene. A confused viewer is a disinterested viewer, and obviously that's bad. Two surefire ways to cut a bad action scene is to work with boring footage and to confuse your audience. I know for a fact that our footage isn't boring, so the only way that we can completely mess this up is by confusing the audience. So let's make sure that we don't do that. Now, second, you'll need to keep the actions purposeful. Every shot should logically flow from the one before it and lead into the one that follows. This is a pretty standard rule for all types of editing, but it's easy to lose track of it during the chaos of an action scene. Third, remember that every action has a reaction. If a character gets punched, we need to see him wince in pain, fall down, yell, or something. If this all happens from one shot in one camera angle, great, that's efficient. But, more often than not, you'll need to purposely cut to another angle to get the best combination of an attack plus a reaction. Also, if you have close-up coverage of your character's faces in a scene, use it. It'll help you to really clearly show the audience the character's physical and emotional reaction to an attack. So, there are two things that you'll need for the next lesson as we start the rough cut. First, you'll need a copy of the beat sheet that we made earlier. If you chose to take notes, make sure you have them nearby. Otherwise, print out a copy of the beat sheet file and use that as reference. Remember, since we don't have a script for this particular scene, the beat sheet's going to be our guide. And second, you're going to want to have close by for reference the master shot. I'm going to drop it into the end of my sequence so I have it available for easy reference whenever I want to refresh my memory on how the scene's supposed to flow. I chose the long camera angle instead of the extreme long camera angle so that I can see a little bit more which characters are actually doing what, because their faces and outfits are a little bit more clear. If you don't want to cut it into the end of your sequence, just keep it close by and know where you can reference it for easy access. Coming up, we're finally ready to start editing our fight scene. We'll be cutting together the key moments of the fight and building a rough structure. This is a really important stage of the editing process, so be prepared to do a bit of work, but also see a pretty huge chunk of progress being made by the time we're done. If you've been sitting down for a while watching these lessons, Now might be a good time to get up, stretch a little bit, maybe grab something to eat or drink. You'll want to be focused, alert, and well rested for the upcoming section. All right, I'll see you in a bit. In this lesson, we're going to begin cutting our fight scene by blocking in a rough structure. First, we need to talk about how you should use this particular lesson. The best way to learn the material in this lesson is going to be to first watch the lesson all the way through without trying to follow along. If you're trying to edit at the same time that you're trying to watch the lesson, even if you keep pausing and unpausing the video, you're not really going to be able to focus on the material as much and really absorb everything that we're talking about. So then after you've watched it once, you can then open up your editing software and reference the lesson as you work to complete this stage of the editing on your own. If you have a dual monitor setup, at this point it's great to put the lesson on the second monitor for reference while you have your editing program on the primary monitor for functionality. You can also use a tablet, a phone, or a laptop as a second viewing platform to have the tutorial within your reach at the same time as you're editing. If you don't have any of these options available to you, no worries. Just keep the lesson in the background and pull it up for reference whenever you need to take a look at it. And last, you can expect me to skip through some of the more basic sections of the cut. I'm going to move through the fight, blocking out the scene in a fairly linear fashion, starting at the beginning and working my way towards the end. However, I want to show you the most important techniques and workflows, and that doesn't necessarily require me to show you how every single edit is made. Plus, I think you'd get bored if we went through every single cut. And remember, if you want to see at any point how I made every edit of the cut in real time, you can watch the unabridged version of the lesson video in the resource files. Before we start, I need to make one disclaimer. Editing is an organic and creative process. You will make mistakes, and for that matter, so will I. I'm going to leave in most of the mistakes and the hiccups in the editing process so that you can see exactly how I fix my problems as they come up. If there's one thing I've learned during my career as an editor, it's this. Learning how to solve problems without getting stuck or accepting a mediocre cut is what makes the difference between a good editor and a great one. I'd also like to mention, this lesson covers a lot of editing tactics, and as a result is rather long. If you feel like you're ready to begin editing your own scene before the lesson's over, feel free to skip to the end, review your homework assignment, and get started editing. I promise, you won't hurt my feelings. Alright, so let's get started by creating a sequence. And I'm just going to call it simply fight_v1. And we'll go up a version every time we go through a different lesson and do something different to the scene. Like, adding sound effects, or tightening the cut, or playing with wild lines, or whatever we happen to be doing. So we'll be able to have a version, basically, that reflects each stage of our editing process. So we'll start here with V1. I have, 1 video layer and 4 audio tracks. So I'm just going to add a couple more video tracks, just in case I need them. Probably won't. And 4 audio tracks should be more than enough, because I think our footage is just stereo, so that's fine. All right, so like we talked about earlier, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down my master shot at the end of the sequence so I can use it for visual reference throughout the fight. Here it is right here, and if you weren't able to find it, you could also sort probably, if you labeled it this way, by the word master, and it would pull up your master shot. But I have it right here. You got an extra long, angle long, and medium long. I'm going to choose the medium long, so that we're a little bit closer to the action. We can kind of see who's doing what a little bit more easily. So, according to our beat sheet, the fight basically starts with the wrist grab and ends with the spinning hook kick to TT's face. So I'm going to look for those moments here. Let's see. There's the wrist grab. All right, so I'll mark it in before that. And I think after watching this a couple times originally, I noticed that they reset this thing, and they didn't go actually all the way through like a true master take in one take. But they do most of it in one chunk, and then they finish it up in a second chunk. So we'll just splice those two pieces together so we have a reference for everything. That's where they stop right here. It looks like they reset. So let's see where the action really kind of... Alright, I'm going to grab that chunk. So that goes from the wrist grab all the way to Dan kneeing TT in the face. And then I noticed earlier that back here, they kind of picked it up and they finished up the fight all the way through the spinning kick. So where's the knee? All right, so we'll start, pick back up there. Fighting. And looks like the spinning kick. Alright. And that's the end of our fight. So I'm just going to splice those two pieces of the master shot together. And here's our transition, which looks a little janky, but doesn't matter for right now. Cool. This is just for reference. Alright, so throw that down at the end of your sequence. Alright, save. And let's get started. Now, like we just said, the first moment in the fight is really the wrist grab. I'm just going to add a couple story beats right before we get to that. Just there's a tiny bit of dialogue happening before our fight actually begins. It'll just make our scene kind of feel a little bit more like a full meal, even though we're cutting it in isolation from the rest of the film. So, I'm going to start with the thugs demanding money from them, and I know I use the keyword demand when I describe that moment, so I'm just going to sift for the word demand. You can manually look in your software or use whatever sort of find functions your software has. This is just the way I'm going to do it. So here are all the shots where the thugs demand money. Got a bunch of different takes, a couple different angles, covering different individuals during the process. And earlier I marked my favorites as I was going through the footage and breaking it down. So let's start with this medium shot here. That's going to be on pretty much all the characters from the point of view, over the shoulder of the thugs. And here we go.
You got our money now, just leave us alone.
All right, so we'll just start with that. Drop it in.
You got our money now, just leave us alone.
All right, and we have a medium close-up version of that same take. So I'm actually just going to punch in a little bit closer, even though this is a blocking in lesson. And really, I shouldn't get nitpicky about this quite yet, but I'm going to, just because it's right here. So I might as well just drop it in. Punch into Dan's face, halfway through that line.
Leave us alone.
So we'll just drop that in. And obviously, you can tell I have some of this stuff marked up already, and that's just so that this lesson doesn't drag on forever and completely bore you to tears. I'm trying to be a little bit prepared so I don't have to hunt and peck for everything. But obviously finding this stuff originally was a little bit more time consuming, and I had to kind of, scrub through things and find where I was which takes I liked the most as I had gone through them. And it was a little bit more of a process. All right, so let's check it out.
You got our money now, just leave us alone.
Okay. Great. And the fight in the actual film, they kind of go on and they talk a little bit more and they blab. For our sake, I'm just going to go right to the section where Thug says, where TT says, get in the fucking warehouse now. And then that immediately is followed by the wrist grab and we're off to the races. All right. Thug's approaching couple through the wrist grab. So that'll obviously encompass any sort of dialogue that happens. So I have this take marked, so let's check this one out. This is a shot of TT.
Please, get in the fucking warehouse, motherfucker, now. Get in the fucking warehouse.
All right, great. Let's just use that. And this is scene 10AC, take 1.
Get in the fucking warehouse.
And remember, you can see all of the timecode and the camera roll information burned into the top left of every shot that I'm using. So but you can't match back to the way that you subclip out your scenes. It's not going to have that information because that's going to depend on exactly how you labeled your stuff. But it will match back exactly to the camera rolls that we supplied you. So if you ever want to find exactly what I'm using, just go to a camera roll and go to that exact timecode and you'll find it.
Get in the fucking warehouse.
Scrub back a little bit.
Get in the fucking warehouse, motherfucker, now.
Great. Drop it in. All right, perfect. Wonderful. All right. So now we're going to start with the wrist grab. So that's the first main fight move, the fight moment of the fight. So I know that there's another take that they filmed kind of at the end of the whole filming process that was a really nice wide angle here, or medium, but it's wider. And it contains a lot of nice visual information that really shows you what's going on. So you can see the camera pans behind Dan as TT finishes his line, and then it continues into the wrist grab. So that's a really visually descriptive way to kind of transition into this fight and really keep everything clear about what's happening.
Hey.
All right, so certainly we could use that. That works well. And I marked another one here that I liked, and I think I prefer this one actually. So there, that's nice. TT motions to Rollins to go do something, so you know that he's kind of the ringleader, reinforces that. Yeah, all right, let's use that one. That part that I just talked about is nice, and then also the speed with which this kind of whole interaction happens. It's nice and aggressive, and kind of, it's going to be a good way to kick off our fight, as opposed to this, which has a little bit more of a delay in it.
Hey.
You could use that. It just feels a little bit more artificial to me. So let's use this second one. So we'll drop that in. Let's see how it's looking so far.
We got our money now. Just leave us alone.
Get in the fucking warehouse, motherfucker. Now.
Yep, that's working really well. And obviously, you know, we'll tighten things up and you know, smooth it all out a little bit later on. Good. All right. So let's see what's next. All right. So Dan grabs the wrist, and then Rollins is going to sucker punch Dan. So one thing I do want to add that's not on our beat sheet that occurs in between those two moments is that Dan here, you can see after Dan pushes Rollins away, he says, "Wait, hold on, hang on a moment." I'd like to see if we can find a take where Dan actually kind of more articulately says that to Rollins, and it kind of makes it a little bit more of a moment out of it. Yeah, Dan just kind of mumbles it. It's kind of a throwaway there, but I think it could be a good moment to include. So let's see if we can find that. Let's see. I believe I saw it here in these scene 10J. Some of these takes had some great moments like that. So let's give this one a shot. It's scene 10J, take 3, a medium shot. And this is going to be, these are all on Dan and Erica. So you see it, you have a medium close version of it, and then you also have a medium version of it. And we have two takes of each. So let's try 10J, like I said, 10J, take 3, medium shot. Wait. Yeah, that's nice, right? So it makes a little bit more of a moment out of it. It feels a little bit more frantic. So we'll use that after the wrist grab. Let's see where we should be picking it up. I'll pick it up as he's kind of pushing him back, but you know, we'll be smoothing it out later anyway.
Wait.
All right, let's drop that in.
Wait.
Right. So obviously this is clunky and rough, but that's basically what we're going for. You know, these types of beats. So let's see. Dan now looks back at Erica, which let's look at our master shot for 1 second. So here's the wrist grab. You know, they're not speaking any of the lines in the master shot. This is strictly about the choreography. So we're not going to see, you know, the wait stuff and, you know, get in the warehouse and all that junk. This is just about the choreography. But you can see that the main beats here are the wrist grab, the push away, Dan pushing Rollins away, and then Dan turns back, looks at Erica, and that's when he gets sort of, ideally, that's where he gets sucker punched right here by Rollins. So let's roll this out if we need to. We don't. I already dropped in enough. So you can see Dan continues, looks back at Erica, and then Rollins is going to make his move and go into Dan like that. But you know, I think there's actually one more line that we can add in here from Rollins. Let's match back to this angle. This 10Z take 1. Match back.
Hey.
So you can see when Dan tells Rollins, you know, wait, Rollins actually says, whoa, hey, all right. And there's a little bit more, even more interaction between them. So let's go ahead and drop that from Rollins in as well. And I should note that keeping all of these types of dialogue lines and whatnot keeps the human element involved in the scene itself and continues to make the characters more relatable. And it makes everything a little bit more exciting and just kind of infuses it with a lot more realism.
Hey.
So we can choose, he can say, all right, hey.
Hey.
I mean, you can pretty much use either one. They're both fine. I'm going to use this one, this hey ho one.
Hey.
All right.
Now. Wait.
And I'm just going to drop it right here. Get rid of that. Tighten this up just a tiny bit. It's bothering me. All right.
Wait. Hey.
All right. Roll this back or slip it back a little bit.
Wait. Hey.
Cool. All right. Rough, but good for now. Great. So now we have all our beats in here. So let's just check out what we have real quick.
We got our money now. Just leave us alone.
Get in the fucking warehouse, motherfucker. Now. Wait. Hey.
All right. Now we need to find an angle of Dan getting hit so that then he can kind of come and fight back. Because it's the wrist grab, Rollins sucker punches Dan, then Dan punches back. So now we'll find, basically, we'll go back to this angle here. And this is where we're going to get Dan being hit. And then Dan punching back. So this is 10J take 3, the medium angle, or medium shot. I actually prefer take 2 of this medium shot.
Wait. Hey.
Cool. All right. So let's just roll this out until Dan does his counterattack. All right. And you can see up here is where TT moves in to kick Dan. So we don't want to include that in this angle. We'll switch to another angle to get that kick in. So we'll just stop before that occurs, right after this punch. All right. So that's Dan's punch back. Right here. And now we'll do TT kicks Dan in the stomach to the ground. Or he kicks Dan in the stomach and then TT punches Dan to the ground. So I'm going to go back actually to this wide angle, 10Z take 1. Because I remember seeing that there's some good coverage of TT kicking Dan right here. So let's just grab this from here. And drop it in. All right, and roll it back a little bit. All right, great. It's a little bit rough, as is everything else in this blocking in lesson, but it gets the point across and it covers all of our beats. So that's what we're looking for.
Wait. Hey.
Great. All right, so we got the kick here into Dan's stomach. Now we're going to cut to a reverse angle of Dan reacting to the kick, and then we'll get TT starting his punch to knock Dan to the ground. So we're pretty much going to go back to this type of angle here, back to this 10J take 2, except I prefer take 3, 10J take 3. So there's the kick hitting Dan and the punch that knocks Dan to the ground. Kick, punch. All right, so we'll drop that in. You know, timing isn't there yet. That's okay. And I wanna switch angles again. We could just leave it like this. We could leave it super rough, but I would like to switch angles back to TT and just have him throw his punch. So we can see here, if we scroll down a little bit, you got Dan punching back through TT punching Dan to the ground here in this 10L take 1. So let's see what that has to offer. Let's check out the medium close-up. All right. So actually, this is the same angle for the most part. It's just a much closer shot. So let's grab this. It's a little bit more clear what's happening. Maybe a little bit too much detail for the blocking in part of the lesson, but it's nice that it really kind of solidifies the fact that we see Dan on the ground and we know what just happened. So it's kind of important as far as a story beat goes. Because in this shot, you can kind of see that Dan goes towards the ground, but it's not, it's sort of clear. It's not that clear though. So let's go ahead and drop in this other one. So 10L take 1, the medium close-up. And that's of TT punching Dan, knocking him to the ground. Great. So Dan's on the ground now. So what comes next? So now TT's going to go towards Erica, throw her onto the ground, and then the thugs are going to start kicking Dan on the ground. All right, so I'm going to speed things up a little bit, and I'm going to go through the next couple story beats here quickly in a time lapse, just to kind of get through a couple more story beats. It's going to be the same exact process of referring to your beat sheet, looking at looking at your action bracketing, finding what shots here include the story beats that you need to depict, and then making sure that the angles at least flow somewhat from one to the other, and kind of clearly show the action that's taking place. And, you know, we're going to clean that all up. We're going to add more camera angles later. But as long as it basically tells a rough story in this blocking in lesson, that's the objective that we're going for. So I'm going to go through a couple more of the beats now, and then we'll pick back up a little bit later in the fight. Now, remember, if you want to see everything that I'm doing right now in real time, you can just check out the unabridged lesson videos included in the exercise files. Or you can check out the updated QuickTime that is exported for this lesson, where you'll be able to see every shot that I chose in the order that I chose them. And they'll all be labeled with the camera roll and the time code of each shot burned into the top left, making it really easy for you to fill in the blanks or recreate any section of the fight that you had trouble with editing on your own. All right, so let's take a look at the scene with our new additions.
You got our money now, just leave us alone.
Get in the fucking warehouse, motherfucker. Now. Wait. Hey, I'll get you.
All right, let's keep going. So we're going to pick back up with the live editing here. So what we've already done together is we started with the wrist grab, and before that were a couple story beats. We went through the sucker punch, Dan hitting back, TT kicking Dan in the stomach onto the ground, Erica got thrown to the ground, and then the thugs were kicking Dan as he was on the ground. So then I went ahead and I edited everything from the from Dan getting back up and knocking TT down, all the way up until this point right here, where Dan and Mouth and Rollins kind of had a little bit of a scuffle on their own. So here we are at this point. We're at the point where TT is about to grab Dan from behind. So we're going to take the rest of this together to the end of the lesson and see how it goes. All right, so here we are. This is after the scuffle, and this is super, you know, There's some issues with this, with obviously with showing all this choreography from this one angle. It kind of falls apart a little bit. It doesn't look completely realistic. So we'll be dealing with that later on. So here's Dan. Obviously, you can kind of tell like something's probably about to happen, which it is. TT's going to sneak up from behind and lock him up and grab him. So let's find that shot. Just going to scrub through my bin a little bit here. All right, so here we go. 10M, take 2, the medium close-up. TT grabs Dan, and then Dan, through the point where Dan knees TT in the face. So I marked up this one here for use in this section. So let's check out what I got. All right, so you can see this is the end of what we just showed here, of him pushing him back. That's Dan pushing Rollins back. All right. And then here's TT coming up behind Dan. And grabs him. So let's go ahead and grab this. This works out well. That's great. That's perfect. So that takes us all the way from TT grabbing Dan from behind, Dan escaping and kneeing TT in the face. And then you can see Dan's moving on to his next target, which is most likely mouth. All right, so let's cut this in from the TT grab to the knee in the face. Drop it in. All right. Cool. All right. That looks like mouth, Rollins. Kind of hard to tell. They're stunt guys, I think, at this point. But I believe that is Rollins. We're supposed to be Rollins. All right. Well, either way, let's move on to Dan punching mouth. So here we have 10. It's scene 10N, and we have takes 1 and 2 basically, and each one has a medium and a medium close-up associated with it. This is going to be Dan, Rollins, and mouth all together, and it's going to take us from Dan punching mouth through Dan flipping Rollins. So that's going to be from Dan punching mouth right here, just to the next beat, where Rollins then attacks Dan and Dan flips him onto the ground. So let's check it out. Let's see what we got. 10N, take 2, the medium shot. Take a look. So you can see over here, you got TT on the ground. So obviously this is occurring after he was just thrown, or kneed, I should say. So that's Rollins, okay. All right. So the master shot, I mean, when we wrote down our beat sheet, I have, Dan punching mouth first. And that's because that's what was in the master shot. But obviously the way that they filmed it, like I said before, sometimes the choreography changes a little bit on set depending on, different ideas that they have or the way things are working out. So it's a little bit different now. It doesn't move on directly to Dan punching mouth. It moves on to Dan fighting with Rollins, which is fine. It's just kind of a chaotic brawl every time Dan gets involved with these two at the same time anyway. So at this point, it's just kind of a matter of cutting this in a way that's the most interesting. So let's see what we can do with it. All right, I'm going to take it from there to there. So that's going to be Dan and Rollins scuffling. Dan kicking mouth, pushing Rollins away, and then blocking a hit from mouth. So we'll just take that. Now, obviously, we have issues here. This is a jump cut, so that's going to have to be cleaned up a little bit later on. We're going to, obviously, we'll cut into either a different angle or a different camera distance in between these to smooth out this transition, so we don't have this jumpiness going on. All right. So for the second one here, I remember seeing Dan doing a pretty cool throat chop to mouth in this section of the fight as we were looking through all the footage. So I'd like to see if I can find that and have Dan really nail mouth before we move on to Dan flipping Rollins onto the ground. So let's see if we can dig that up. I believe I wrote down that I saw that in scene 10 AG, take 1. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, okay. All right, so look, so what we have down here on our timeline, Dan pushes Rollins away right here, and then he moves on to Mouth. So in this scene, scene 10 AG, take 1, this coverage, we have Dan pushing Rollins away right here, moving on to Mouth. He blocks once, twice, and then does a throat chop. So let's use that throat chop. It sounds like he actually kind of hit him. So super realistic. Kind of works out for us. Not so good for this actor, though. All right. Block. Actually, you know what? We'll let him block a second time, because I think that's what he actually does. And then, yeah, he moves in for the hit, for the throat chop. And that's when we'll cut to this other angle. And we'll clean this up later, as always. All right. So next is when, next we're going to be looking for Dan to flip Rollins. So we know he does it in 10N take 2, because we already saw that when we were looking through it. So I'm just going to match back to this, to the previous shot, and keep playing and see how it looks. Yeah. All right. This is a good angle. So we'll let Mouth fall away there. Here comes Rollins. Block. Flip. Ground. Great. Knocks Mouth down. And then Rollins will come in here. I'm just trying to cut out a little bit of this fat. We don't need all these frames sitting there. Great. All right. Now here is where you can see the next move is when TT is going to hit Dan with a bottle, which in our beat sheet is described as this: TT punching Dan to the ground, because that's what it appeared to be during the master shot. And that may have been what they originally intended on it to be. But either way, it turned into a bottle smash across the head, which is definitely cooler. So that's what we're going to be looking for at this point. So I'm just going to actually search. Wrong hotkey. I'm going to actually search for bottle smash. Yeah, and we have a bunch of coverage of that. So let's check out this one. 10P take 1. It's a medium close-up. Dan and TT with the bottle being smashed. And here he comes. And this, I believe, is filmed in slow-mo. Yeah, 40 frames per second. So a little bit slower, a little bit overcranked. So that'll be cool. Once we start playing with sound and stuff later on, this will kind of be it'll let us really accent this moment, because it'll occur, more slowly, and we can play up the sound design and whatnot. All right. We'll let him flip. We're going to have to find a smoother way of transitioning between these two shots, because, we want to go to the bottle smash now, but obviously TT's all the way over here, so it's kind of going to look like he teleports a little bit. So later on, when we clean up the footage, we'll have to find a nicer way to smooth out this transition as well. But for the time being, let's just go straight to the bottle smash. Drop it in. Yeah, so you can see it's a bit of a jump right here, but we'll fix that. All right, so Dan's going down to the ground. So what's next? TT knocks Dan to the ground. All right, so then TT's going to kick Dan on the ground. Dan's going to block a few kicks, punch TT, and then do a spinning hook kick to TT's face, and that's the end of the fight. All right, so let's see what we got. Bottle smash through spin kick. It's a medium shot. We have a medium close. Looks like I liked the medium when I was looking through them. Let's see. All right, so here's obviously the the pre-lap from when he was smashing the bottle. All right, so Dan's regaining his composure here. TT starts kicking him. Where does he block? He blocks right here. And then Dan hits TT back. And then the spin kick should come next. All right, so he faked the spin kick because this is the actor, and I guess he's not able to do a spin kick. So ultimately, we're going to be combining shots of the stuntman spinning and doing a spin kick with the actual actor, so it looks like the actor does it and it's all smooth. But anyway, for now, we need Dan kicking TT. I'm sorry, TT kicking Dan. There we go. Let's just drop that in. It's got some kicking in it. All right, great. Again, this transition will have to be smoothed out too. And I think later on, we'll probably end up having a reaction shot of Erica right in here. So we'll have a close-up on her face, reacting to Dan getting knocked in the head with the bottle. And that'll be a nice way to transition in between these two moments, especially transitioning going from slow-mo to back to real time. The reaction shot will be a good way for us to reset that. But that'll come later. All right, let's see what else we got. Let's try this one. 10R, take 1. All right. This is the medium close. There's TT kicking down on the ground. All right. So you know what, actually? So this is what we'll do. So Dan's regaining his composure here. Right about here, maybe, halfway through TT's kick. We'll just cut into a shot of TT. Looks like he was just hit there, so. All right, we'll just give him one kick. Drop that in. Again, it'll be smoothed out later. All right, now we need a shot of Dan blocking some of the kicks. So we'll cut out to a wider shot here. Punch. All right. And that covers all the rest of our beats in the scene. Dan blocking a kick, Dan hitting TT back, and then Dan spinning and kicking him. And this is actually the stunt guy. It's kind of hard to tell because these guys look pretty similar. And he's spinning. So you can't see his face too much. But yeah, this is... Let's see if we can tell. Man, they found a pretty good lookalike. Yeah, but either way, this is the stunt guy. So anyway, great. So that's all the rest of the beats of our fight. So we'll drop that in. So that takes us from Dan blocking the kicks, Dan punching TT twice, Dan spinning hook kick to TT's face. And that's the last beat. So let's take a look at what we have.
We got our money now, just leave us alone.
Get in the fucking warehouse, motherfucker. Now. Wait. Hey, I'll get you.
Cool. All right. That looks pretty good, especially for a rough cut, a blocking in. Obviously, there were moments that didn't work out that great, and the pacing's a little bit weird, and some of the connective tissue between certain moments isn't really there, and things are a little bit herky-jerky. But the story's there, and all the main beats that we have in our beat sheet are definitely well portrayed and make a lot of sense, and it feels pretty cool for what it is so far. So yeah, it's working out pretty good. I'm happy with how that looks. All right, so for your homework, you're obviously going to want to sit down and block in the scene for yourself. You'll need to have this done before moving on to the next lesson. Take your time and have some fun with this part. It's pretty low stress, and you don't have to worry about getting everything perfect quite yet. In case you get stuck or you run into any trouble, remember that you have the cheat sheet available to you. In the cheat sheet folder, the updated QuickTime will show you what my cut looks like after completing this lesson, and you'll be able to use the burned in source file names and timecodes to locate and match the exact shots I'm using if you choose to do so. And last, if you'd like to view the full uncut screen capture that shows the entire process of me editing this particular section of the course in real time with no time-lapsed editing, you'll find these QuickTimes located in the Lesson Resources folder for this particular lesson. Coming up in the next lesson, adding more camera angles, we're going to go through our cut and smooth out the editing a bit by adding additional shots and tweaking the ones we have. This will give our rough cut a bit more energy and visual interest while cleaning it up a little bit. All right, see you in a bit.